Peskov is done. For several weeks now, rumors have been swirling in the Kremlin corridors that its main mouthpiece, Dmitry Peskov, will not return from vacation and will be quietly sent off as an ambassador somewhere. Insiders are whispering that the top propagandist, Dmitry Kiselyov, is already being seriously considered for the position of Putin's press secretary. Apparently, that's why a distressed Peskov has been frequenting shady parties lately. But the disappearance of the nonsense spouter is just the tip of the iceberg. What other massive problems are brewing within the Russian dictator's inner circle? And what is happening to the man himself?
The Kremlin is considering Dmitry Kiselyov's candidacy for the position of presidential press secretary. It seems there's a reason why Peskov has recently started appearing more often at rather questionable parties.
Putin is in a state of hysteria and paranoia. The Russian dictator is carrying out the most extensive purge of his inner circle yet. He fears his own people will exploit his failing health to vacate the throne. Furthermore, doctors are shocked by the Kremlin leader's physical appearance. Putin grinds his teeth at night and has literally worn down his jaw. Now he can't even pronounce basic words. Even his hurrah sounds like the cry of an orangutan. A gruesome diagnosis from the dentists. Meanwhile, the Russian war machine has effectively stalled due to a severe personnel shortage. But the dictator continues to consume reports of fake victories for breakfast. Additionally, Moscow's mayor has openly sided with Ukraine, and Russia's interior minister is being told to step down. Watch all the shocking insider reports right now. Greetings, this is the Ukraine Today channel. Let's talk about the total backroom chaos in the Kremlin. My name is Andrei Silikov. Let's begin. The Kremlin dictator has finally succumbed to paranoia and primal fear. As historians and analysts note, Russia today resembles a vast concentration camp, where Putin has begun to behave worse than Stalin did in his final years. Realizing the war against Ukraine has failed, he has unleashed a wave of brutal internal repression against his own elites. The arrest of generals, purges of oligarchs, and persecution of former allies signal the system's death throes. Soon, the Russian elite may realize that continuing the war guarantees their own destruction. This makes the scenario of a palace coup or a revolt in the very heart of Moscow quite realistic.
Russia is an empire, and they don't collapse from the edges but from the center. There must be a major political crisis and a struggle at the core. Perhaps a specific group of conspirators or disgruntled individuals will emerge to try and oust Putin from power and isolate him, says historian Yaroslav Hrytsak. This is what happened in the final years of Stalin's life. He was extremely suspicious. Everyone in his circle feared that he might repress them as well. This is what's happening now. Whether Putin is doing this consciously or not, whether he's irritated or truly paranoid, we see that more and more people who were his loyal supporters are becoming targets of FSB persecution.
This colossal stress from the expectation of betrayal is already physically destroying the aging dictator. Medical experts, after analyzing Putin's recent speeches, have noticed significant changes in his appearance and speech. As specialists explain, due to constant nervous tension, the bunker grandpa grinds his teeth heavily at night. This has led to his jaw muscles becoming unnaturally enlarged, deforming the shape of his face.
And then there's all that whistling and hissing, the general slurring of speech plus dry mouth. A very underrated factor, often a side effect of antidepressants and sleeping pills. What do killers take for their nerves? And there you have it, a big yawn for the whole haul. A small, underdeveloped lower jaw and tiny teeth didn't interest anyone, but that is the very foundation that determines speech. That's how everything is with him. Geopolitics, the world's second army, a weak chin, and a triple yawn.
As a result, Putin's vaunted facade, which Russia's best plastic surgeons worked on for years, has simply collapsed. The dictator has openly begun to mumble, chew his words, and drop sounds. And it seems, seeing the leader fading physically, the generals want to use lies to maintain his morale for as long as possible. The military continues to feed him fairy tales. The crafty chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, reports mythical successes to Putin twice a day, skillfully manipulating him into believing that time is supposedly on Russia's side. Even though the occupiers' problems in the war in Ukraine are an immense pile, and there hasn't been a whiff of success there in recent months. This and more was reported by journalists from the Financial Times.
Western intelligence told the publication that production has effectively plateaued in almost all areas, except for drones and long-range weapons, where the Kremlin is currently pumping in maximum resources. This is already noticeable at the front. According to Blackbird Group analysts, from February to May, the Russian Federation captured 164 square kilometers, compared to 1,151 square kilometers during the same period last year. Ukrainian drones are hitting logistics, airfields, convoys, and refineries, gradually eating away at the Russian advantage in manpower and artillery. Meanwhile, Putin, as former Kremlin officials say, is still confident that victory is just a matter of time.
And while Putin tries to hold on to power, the Russian information space is already openly losing its mind from the humiliations. Enraged by the loss of the fleet and the harsh blockade of Crimea, Z-bloggers have gone off the rails and are directly demanding that the commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy, Alexander Moiseev, answer for his words or self-destruct.
And really, why not provide supplies to Crimea by sea? It's ours after all, and whoever says otherwise is a slanderer. We don't need USVs. There are no tasks. Well, there are tasks. The Americans ran convoys across the Atlantic. Can't the esteemed man in the photo provide convoys in the Black Sea puddle? He can, right? In short, it's high time to answer for your words and actions over the last 5 years. Or for...
And at the same time, a massive scandal erupted in the capital itself. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin suddenly betrayed his boss. Over 500 messages appeared on his official Telegram channel with slogans like "Glory to Ukraine," threats that Moscow will burn, and direct calls to donate to the AFU. The posts were deleted after 15 minutes, but the terrified mayor's office couldn't come up with any explanation. How did this happen so suddenly? But these are far from all of the Kremlin's problems. A colossal blow to the Kremlin's gas station. Ukraine's long-range attacks have knocked out over 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity, triggering the largest fuel crisis since the start of the invasion. Currently, at gas stations in the Russian Federation, there is either no gasoline at all, or it's issued with strict limits of up to 20 liters per person. Watch all the details of the fuel collapse right now in our report.
Russians' nerves are fraying. Gasoline in the gas station country has become a luxury. An acute fuel shortage is noted in several regions of Russia. There are kilometer-long queues at gas stations. For example, in the Lipetsk region, they report a total lack of gasoline at some gas stations. A similar situation is also observed in the Yaroslavl region, Stavropol Krai, Tyumen, and Cheboksary, where drivers complain about the shortage of A92, A95, and diesel fuel.
What exactly is going on? Are we living in some kind of stone age? We're living in the era of dinosaurs. Why is there no gasoline in Chuvashia? And even if there is some, 92 costs 89 rubles per liter.
Analysts suggest that the latest wave of strikes could have knocked out more than 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity. The International Energy Agency called this disruption unprecedented in the entire time of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. In particular, fuel problems hit hardest in regions located near the front line.
The Federal Anti-Monopoly Service has already gone to open cases together with the prosecutor's office regarding, well, various gas stations. They arrived at, I think, Nefta Magistral and other, well, independent gas stations that don't have their own oil production or refining systems, which buy fuel on the exchange from producers. So they simply raised prices above 100, 110, 115 rubles per liter. And now, accordingly, the anti-monopoly authorities have demanded price cuts, even though there's no fuel.
Problems have started even in places where they didn't exist before. For example, in St. Petersburg, Moscow, Voronezh, and Tula. Russian officials, meanwhile, are trying to pretend that everything is just fine. The current fuel crisis in Russia could become the most serious since the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. Problems have already affected 53 regions of the aggressor country. At many gas stations, you can buy no more than 20 liters of gasoline and 40 liters of diesel per tank. As Reuters reports, due to the growing shortage, Moscow is considering the possibility of buying fuel abroad. According to the agency, supplies could be organized from one of the Asian countries. Earlier, Russia had already considered the option of importing by sea. Russia also purchased fuel from Belarus and Kazakhstan. However, as Reuters sources note, these countries won't be able to help significantly if the situation worsens further.
Oil production in Russia has been declining for the sixth month in a row, fueled by increasingly frequent Ukrainian drone strikes on the country's energy infrastructure, which disrupt the operation of storage and transport facilities needed to maintain production. According to Bloomberg calculations based on OPEC data, as a result of this cut, Russia's oil production was about 690,000 barrels per day below the OPEC plus quota. From an article in the Moscow Times.
Russia will receive less money from its oil, but that's not even the worst thing for them. If we talk not about the short term, but about the medium term for the Kremlin, a more frightening thing is what to do with the wells. Oil wells work in such a way that either they work at almost full capacity, or they are shut down. If you can't export the oil, if you can't process it inside the country, then where does the oil go? There's virtually no other choice but to just go ahead and turn off the tap on that well.
Long-range sanctions are hitting Russia's pocketbook, depriving the Kremlin of funding for its war machine. The day before, Ukraine's defense forces struck the Tyumen oil refinery. This was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The Tyumen refinery processes 9 million tons of oil per year. The plant produces gasoline, diesel fuel, fuel oil, and aviation fuel. It plays an important role in providing the regions of Western Siberia with fuel. In May, oil production in Russia fell to a yearly low amid intensifying Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries. According to Reuters, in late May, almost all major oil industry facilities in central Russia were forced to reduce or completely stop operations. Victoria Chistyukina for Freedom TV channel.
At this time, Crimea is also rapidly plunging into the Stone Age. The occupiers have completely stopped selling fuel at gas stations to the civilian population. Following a total fuel shortage, power went out on the peninsula, and due to de-energized pumping stations, massive water disruptions began. All this is the logical result of precise and devastating Ukrainian strikes on the enemy's oil and energy infrastructure. Watch more about the occupiers' collapse right now in this report.
The Ukrainian military successfully hit targets on both sides of the Crimean Bridge. This was stated by President Volodymyr Zelensky. They attacked in particular maritime logistics for oil transport in the Krasnodar region, an oil depot in temporarily occupied Kerch, and Russian army air defenses. According to Zelensky, units of the Security Service of Ukraine, the Unmanned Systems Forces, the main intelligence directorate, and Special Operations Forces were involved in the operation.
We have long come up with the concept of turning Crimea into something of a trap, not like a fortress, as they said, that there would be either a logistical route through the Kerch Strait, through Crimea to the south of our, so to speak, mainland, but to close it off completely, both from the mainland territory, that's Mariupol, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and accordingly all bridges and ferry crossings, and from Kerch. These strikes, they actually create conditions for the isolation of Crimea and then to hit across all territories.
The commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brovdy, clarified. Among the targets hit were an oil depot at an oil terminal near Kerch, Kasta 2E2 radar stations near Kurortne, and Neboyu in Kerch. Several gas compressor stations in the settlements of Aromatny, Zhuravlivka, and Kliuchi were also hit. All facilities are located in temporarily occupied Crimea and, according to the SBU, were used in the supply system for Russian troops. Analysts emphasize the armed forces of Ukraine aim to clear the peninsula of the Russian military component.
They're already planning to run away from there. I'll say it straight, there have been such trends more than once. They would appear, then the Crimeans would sort of calm down, especially the military, that is, representatives of the occupation forces. And now the mood is to run. Many are already working out routes to return to Russia, those who came there with the occupation, especially civilians. Right now, the mood is such that it leads to panic. Moreover, it's fueled by our strikes, shortages, for example, in the energy sector. There's no gasoline, no oil. There's nothing in all directions from Kerch to Sevastopol. That's all of Crimea.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, the sale of fuel at gas stations has completely stopped in any format. The occupation authorities reported that fuel will only be released to state services that ensure the peninsula's vital functions. Such a sharp fuel shortage for Russian logistics could hit the aggressor country's economy hard, experts note.
Russia is dependent on its railroads. There is some traffic there, but it depends even more on the highways. And if road logistics are cut off or significantly reduced, Russia will face a real collapse. So we must keep up the pressure. We've already managed to significantly cut Russia's oil and gas export revenues significantly. A lot depends on it overall by more than 50%. And Russia now spends 3 times more on the war than it receives in budget revenues from the oil and gas sector.
In addition to fuel shortages in Russian-occupied Crimea, damage to the power grid has caused partial blackouts for consumers in several districts of the peninsula. As a result, the water supply was also partially cut off. The occupation authorities reported that to eliminate the overload of power grids outside Sevastopol, a schedule of temporary power outages has been introduced in the city.
Due to damage to the power grids, there was a partial disconnection of consumers in the northwestern, central, and south coast energy districts. Emergency restoration work is underway. Krimenergo is quoted by Krim Reali on Telegram.
Analysts at the American Institute for the Study of War note that Ukrainian strikes on Russian transport and rail infrastructure are already disrupting supply lines for occupation forces and complicating Russian logistics on the left bank of the Kherson region and in Crimea. According to experts, further fire impact on key supply routes could have a chain effect on the battlefield and significantly reduce Russia's ability to provide troops with critical resources. Nikita Skoblikov for Freedom TV channel.
And as usual, a mouthful of water and 30 seconds of shame. Dictator Putin is still silent about Ukraine's massive strike on the Moscow oil refinery. While social media was exploding with videos of a blazing Kapotnya, official pro-Kremlin media devoted only 30 seconds of airtime to the historic disaster, and the Kremlin traditionally lied about the high efficiency of air defense. See more details below.
I have honestly never seen such a truly beautiful and remarkable morning in my entire life. Just now there were 4 loud explosions.
These images flew around the world's social networks in a matter of seconds. Moscow and the Moscow region were attacked by at least 200 Ukrainian drones on the night of June 18th. The most serious damage was recorded at an oil refinery in the Kapotnya district of Moscow. The Ukrainian Defense Forces first attacked it on June 16th, and 2 days later they launched a second strike. Muscovites immediately began writing about numerous explosions and posting videos of attacks on the refinery.
How can one live in such a reality? Black sky. You won't get to school or work today. But it looks so nightmarish. I just don't know.
I don't know when this will end. There's a war there. The windows are shaking, they're shelling the capital. The regions shouldn't have to see this either. What do you think of the situation overall? Today from 5 to 7, we just watched about 15 drones fly out from right under my windows, practically. I just have no words.
Putin didn't have any words either. Only his press secretary reported that Russian air defense supposedly showed high efficiency during the attack on Moscow. However, analysts believe that Russia's response was more like a scramble than a well-planned strategic defense.
Videos from the capital's streets showed fragments of the ensuing chaos. In video footage verified by CNN and analyzed by experts, soldiers are seen firing man-portable air defense systems from a busy highway while traffic cautiously passes by. People scatter in search of shelter as a drone, likely shot down by Russian air defenses, crashes into a large shopping center. From a CNN publication.
On the day of the second attack, Putin was in Kazan at the ASEAN summit. In his speech, he spoke about building a so-called multipolar world, trading in national currencies, and also held meetings with leaders of Southeast Asian countries. He also spoke about the development of joint tourism.
We are grateful for the decision of the low side to donate 2 animals to Russia, 2 elephants. You can be absolutely sure that they will be kept in the very best possible conditions.
By ignoring the strike on Moscow on June 18th, Putin wanted to demonstrate calm and shape a corresponding attitude toward the Ukrainian attack in society as a whole. But people perceived the Kremlin-head silence as evidence of weakness and helplessness, experts say.
To pull off such stunts, however, one must have a very high level of basic trust. People must truly believe that the president himself understands everything correctly and tells the truth all the time. And that basic trust, after 4 years of stories about everything going according to plan, is exactly what's missing. Abbas Galyamov, political scientist on Telegram.
Russian so-called military correspondents have already accused the authorities of lying, writes the American Institute for the Study of War. Pro-Kremlin bloggers emphasized that Ukraine is moving the war into Russian regions far beyond the border areas, and therefore it is necessary to strengthen air defense around facilities across the country. Another accused the Russian media of significantly downplaying the significance of the strikes in their publications. Another criticized the state media for reports on the so-called special military operation that are far from reality.
This is the beginning of the end of Moscow's power over Russia. To be more precise, the Kremlin's power over Moscow and Russia, and to be even more precise, Putin's power over Russia. What we are seeing right now is the beginning of the end of Putin's power, the Kremlin's and Moscow's rule over the rest of Russia.
Moscow's stability now means the presence of Ukrainian drones in the sky of the RF as Russians and Muscovites themselves elected Putin, who brought the war to their homes, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. And according to the German defense minister, Putin does not want to think about his defeats on the battlefield, and despite the losses, he intends to continue the war.
Putin has reached a dead end. His attack on Ukraine has caused enormous damage and losses to his own army. The Kremlin sees the negative consequences for them. Ukraine is causing more and more damage to Russia.
President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine wants to end the war by winter through diplomacy and pressure on the RF.
But we understand who we are dealing with. Putin is war. Therefore, if the war continues, we will need a winter aid package. This should include an energy package, gas, diesel, as well as necessary energy equipment and a missile package of at least 300 units for the winter. Let's prepare for this right now, while at the same time maximizing diplomatic efforts.
Since 2024, Ukraine has intensified long-range attacks on Russian oil refineries and military facilities. Recently, it broke through Russian defenses in St. Petersburg and repeatedly struck Moscow, bringing the war to the territory of Russia's two largest cities. Natalia Gusak for the Freedom TV channel.
And what do you think about these events? Write to me in the comments, give a like, and stay informed about the main things. More to come.